I'm deeply opposed to Senator McConnell's plan. First of all, it transfers enormous power to the president. Second, in the real world, it'll be easy for the president to get 34 Democratic senators to sustain his veto, so there will be no real cuts. The way it's written, I think, is basically a surrender by the Republicans.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? Newt Gingrich versus Mitch McConnell. I seem to remember Newt Gingrich taking things to the brink not so long ago. It didn't work out so well PR-wise, even if on principle, of course, he's right. The question is, what's really going on out there? Conservatives seem to be in revolt against a plan that probably in the end won't be a reality, but it did push the burden off on this debt increase to the presidency. Here to explain it himself, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell from the great state of Kentucky. Senator McConnell, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Laura, glad to be with you. There's a good deal of conservative support for what I laid out yesterday, beginning with the Wall Street Journal editorial page today. Look, we've been in these negotiations with the president. He has asked us to raise the debt ceiling, and we've hoped we could use this as an opportunity to do something important for the country. But basically, he's given us two choices. One is that the Republican Party become the tax collector for the welfare state, and no Republican Party I've had the privilege of serve is ever going to take that deal. I'm certainly not. Or that we sort of have a bipartisan agreement to accept a smoke and mirrors deal and call it good. Not on my watch. So doing the right thing for the country is our first obligation. When we cannot force a result, we need to do the next best thing, and that's clarify the differences between the parties. The Democratic Party is the party of big government, tax, and spend, the party that brought the American people government-run health care. We're not going to have any part of that, so I'm not going to allow him to push us into making a bad deal. The other point is they want to blame the economy on us, and the reason default is no better idea today than when Newt Gingrich tried it in 1995 is it destroys your brand and would give the president an opportunity to blame Republicans for bad economy. Look, he owns the economy. He's been in office almost 3 years now, and we refuse to let him entice us in to co-ownership of a bad economy.
Right. Well, why is National Review Online calling it a convoluted scheme? Stephen Hayes, the Weekly Standard, and the McConnell plan's pitfalls. Weekly Standard, moving on from Mitch McConnell, and there are other also uncharitable things said. And these are people I think most conservatives, they're in agreement. This government has to be shrunk. We have to grow the economy. But Senator, the problem with your 3-point trigger plan, while it puts the burden and shifts the burden to the greatest extent to Obama, in effect, there is kind of a vote at the beginning to raise the debt ceiling because you're ceding your authority.
No, it's not. No, it only authorizes the president to ask for it. There will be no vote to raise the debt ceiling, I suspect, by any Republican.
But isn't that passing the buck, Senator? Isn't that passing the buck of leadership
no, it's
onto
not.
the White House?
We've been trying to get this liberal president to sign a deal worth signing. You know, it makes a difference when you only control a third of the government. If we could run the whole government out of the House of Representatives, we'd be able to get a result that we would like. But we control 1/3 of the government. And it's become increasingly clear that he's trying to entice us into doing one of two things. Either sign on to a bad deal that raises taxes or, go into default and allow us to have co-ownership of a bad economy. I don't think that's a good idea for Republicans. I don't think it's a good idea for the country.
When I first heard some of my friends out there calling you Pontius Pilate, and this is what we friends do to each other. Okay, we call each other out to circular firing squad. I looked at the specifics of what you're pushing and what you're offering. Again, this is a backup plan, and I get it. I get the fact that it forces this president time and again to raise that debt ceiling and to propose cuts. And if he doesn't, you guys can vote to disapprove it. I think that does win in the PR wars, especially moving into this election cycle. This is an election year dynamic that's playing out. So I get that. But when I see the New York Times, on the other hand, Senator McConnell praising the deal, Harry Reid seeming to be open to it, and even the White House murmurs that it might be something acceptable, I get a little nervous. Why do you think they are embracing it?
Because they want to raise the debt ceiling. And, of course, we know that's going to happen. just like we knew shutting down the government in 1995 was not going to work for us. It helped Bill Clinton get reelected. I refused to help Barack Obama get reelected by marching Republicans into a position where we have co-ownership of a bad economy.
Okay, so that's the nugget. I want to make sure everyone listening to this show understands what you just said. You think that if you go down this road that we're going down now, Obama's going to be able to hang this debt ceiling increase in the election. It's going to go on you guys.
No,
and
it'll be the
this
economy.
Is a burden shift?
What he will do,
excuse me.
If we go into default, he will say that Republicans are making the economy worse, and try to convince the public, maybe with some merit, if people start not getting their Social Security checks and military families start not getting letters saying their service people overseas don't get paid. It's an argument he could have a good chance of winning, and all of a sudden we are co-ownership. We have co-ownership of a bad economy. That is very bad positioning going into election. Look, my first choice was to do something important for the country, but my second obligation is to my party and to my conference to prevent them from being sucked in to a horrible position politically that would allow the president probably to get reelected because we didn't handle this difficult situation correctly.
So you're playing the political realist role here.
If we can't get a good deal for the country, that's my first choice. If we cannot get a deal for the country out of this liberal president and this Democratic Senate that cuts spending and make a difference for the country, then I refuse to allow them to suck us in to having co-ownership of this bad economy.
So by the fact that the nation would go into default, because you think now that Obama won't blink first, isn't there a chance that he would blink if you run it up to the very end? Why not force it to the very end? I'm playing devil's advocate and channeling.
No, I know you are.
I know you are.
And you also remember how it didn't work in '95. What will happen is the administration will send out letters to 80 million Social Security recipients and to military families, and they will all start attacking members of Congress. That's not a useful place to take us. And then the president will have the bully pulpit to blame Republicans for all of this disruption, and all of a sudden we'll end up having co-ownership of a bad economy. Right now he owns the economy 100%. And it took a couple of years for people to quit blaming it on President Bush. Well, I don't think that works for the president anymore. It's his economy, and we refuse to allow him to put us in a position of taking co-ownership of it.
And just one final question. Obama's saying you're unwilling to compromise and raise taxes. And
that's correct.
My question to you, and we're cheering that, but how haven't we already, to some extent, compromised if we, in effect, agree to have the debt ceiling raised by ceding our legislative authority to the White House? And doesn't that set a bad precedent?
If anybody seriously doubts that the United States is going to renege on its credit for the first time in our history, I think that's just not going to happen. We all know that isn't going to happen, and I think the point here is we had hoped this would present an opportunity to cut spending. It looks as if, it may change, but it looks as if it's only going to be an opportunity for him to try to entice us in to raising taxes. And as I said when I started, I'm not going to be a part of turning the Republicans into tax collectors for the welfare state. This guy is going to try to keep government spending at this huge level in perpetuity and try to entice us into driving taxes up to finance it. And we're not going to make that deal.
To Michelle Bachmann and Jim DeMint, who seem to be going full frontal assault against your idea, what do you say in wrapping up?
Oh, look, there are always differences among Republicans. At the end of the day, we're going to have a good election next year. It's going to be a referendum on the president, and it's a big party with lots of different points of view. They're out running for president. I'm hoping they're having a good time.
You don't think it's going to end up being a referendum on you?
No.
Well, I'm reading these emails coming into my website during this interview, and the Gallup poll said people don't want the debt ceiling raised. I mean, it's constant.
Right.
I mean, they don't want it raised.
That's right, and I bet there won't be a single Republican vote to raise the debt ceiling at the end of the day.
Senator Mitch McConnell, we really appreciate your taking time with us. I've been trying to unpack this proposal bit by bit, looking at the political reality of what this president would agree to, what could get through the House of Representatives, and how they're going to try to do the jujitsu to hang it all on the necks of the Republicans. I think I understand where you're coming from. I really appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you, Laura.